It was a cold Monday morning, the kind that makes you want to pull the covers over your head and stay in bed just a little longer. But Jessica couldn't afford to do that. For the past 10 years, she'd poured her heart and soul into Dalton and Brooks Financial. She woke up early, stayed late, and made sacrifices that most people would never understand. But this morning felt different. This morning, her life was about to change forever. As Jessica sat in that sleek, glass-walled conference room, facing Amanda Price, the new CEO, along with her smug supervisor, Kevin, and the ever-distant HR manager, Richard, she could feel something was off. Her heart raced as she tried to keep her composure. After everything she had done for this company, she had no idea that the woman across from her was about to strip it all away. The words that Amanda spoke next would echo in Jessica's mind for years to come. "Jessica, we're restructuring, and your position has been deemed redundant." But what if Jessica had seen this coming all along? What if, instead of succumbing to defeat, she took control of the situation in a way that no one expected? You see, Jessica wasn't just any employee at Dalton and Brooks. She was the one everyone relied on, always there to fix mistakes, mentor the newcomers, and save the day when things went wrong. And while she had been loyal to the company, she had also been loyal to herself. The truth was, Jessica had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Just 3 weeks earlier, during a routine evening at her desk, she had stumbled upon an email thread that was never meant for her eyes. It was a careless mistake, but one that would change everything. The email revealed a secret plan. The CEO and her team were systematically eliminating senior employees, all in the name of modernizing the company. It was then that Jessica knew the truth. The loyalty she had shown the company, the sacrifices, the overtime, none of it mattered to them. But it mattered to her. And now, she was ready to make them see just how wrong they were to think they could get rid of her so easily. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be hers to control. And Jessica was about to teach them all a lesson in what happens when you push someone who has nothing left to lose. Stay tuned to find out how Jessica turned this betrayal into the fight of her life, and how she found the strength to rise above, showing that sometimes the real power lies in turning the tables when you least expect it. This introduction sets the tone for Jessica's journey, hinting at her quiet preparation for the layoff and her decision to fight back. It engages the audience by building suspense and curiosity, while also hinting at the deeper themes of loyalty, betrayal, and resilience. It ensures that the viewer is invested in Jessica's journey and eager to find out how she handles the situation that has been thrust upon her. Jessica had always been the first to arrive and the last to leave. For 10 years, her life revolved around Dalton and Brooks Financial. She'd sacrificed countless weekends, long nights, and countless hours to ensure the company's success. From managing complex client accounts to mentoring new hires, Jessica had done it all. Her dedication was unquestionable. But more than just the technical skills she brought to the table, it was her unwavering loyalty to the company and her colleagues that set her apart. There was the time she led a crucial project to secure a multi-million-dollar contract with a high-profile client. It wasn't easy. The deadline was tight, and the project required every ounce of her expertise. The client had high expectations, and the pressure was unbearable at times. But Jessica rose to the challenge. She coordinated every detail, ensured the team stayed on track, and worked tirelessly to deliver a final proposal that was nothing short of perfect. The result: not only did Dalton and Brooks secure the contract, but the client praised Jessica for her leadership, calling it the smoothest project they'd ever worked on. That moment felt like a victory, not just for the company, but for Jessica personally. She had earned the respect and trust of her colleagues and clients alike. But despite all her hard work, Jessica rarely asked for anything in return. Sure, she got the occasional thank you, but deep down, she knew that her dedication wasn't just a means to get ahead. It was because she genuinely believed in the company's mission. She believed in her team. She believed in making the world of finance a little better, one client at a time. However, as the years passed, things began to change at Dalton and Brooks. The company was facing some tough financial times. They cut budgets, scaled down departments, and made changes that made Jessica question where all her hard work had gone. But even then, Jessica kept going. She worked even harder to keep the company afloat, believing that if she just pushed through, things would get better. The lesson here is clear. No matter how dedicated you are, how much you give of yourself, there are moments when others may fail to recognize or appreciate the sacrifices you make. Jessica's story reminds us that loyalty and dedication should always be valued, but it's also important to know when it's time to ask for recognition and acknowledge our own worth. No one should work in silence, expecting nothing in return, because, as Jessica would soon learn, sometimes even the most loyal employees are taken for granted. And that brings us to the moment when everything changed. The day Amanda Price walked into Dalton and Brooks Financial was the day everything started to shift. At just 34, Amanda was young, driven, and full of ambition. She had a reputation for shaking things up, for taking risks, and for pushing boundaries. But while her enthusiasm was undeniable, it soon became clear that she saw the world, and the company, through a different lens than the people who had built it. When Amanda was appointed CEO, the news spread quickly through the office. Some were excited by the prospect of new leadership, while others, like Jessica, felt a sense of uncertainty. Amanda was a woman of few words, and her approach was sharp, clinical, and businesslike. It wasn't that she lacked vision. It was that her vision didn't seem to take into account the hard work, sacrifices, and deep-rooted loyalty of the company's long-standing employees. Jessica could feel the tension in the air as Amanda began making bold decisions. A strategic shift was announced almost immediately. A plan to modernize the company sounded promising at first. Amanda was bringing in fresh ideas, cutting-edge technology, and innovative ways to operate. But it didn't take long for Jessica to realize that Amanda's idea of modernizing wasn't about improving the culture or values that the company had built. It was about slashing costs, reducing headcount, and making things more efficient. This is when Jessica began to worry. Amanda's strategic changes didn't seem to include the senior staff members who had been with the company through thick and thin. Jessica's dedication, which had once been celebrated, now felt like a liability in Amanda's eyes. What Amanda saw as dead weight, Jessica saw as experience, as the foundation that had kept Dalton and Brooks strong for so many years. As the weeks went on, the company's atmosphere shifted dramatically. There were whispers in the halls about layoffs, budget cuts, and the departure of several long-term employees. The culture of collaboration and mentorship that Jessica had worked so hard to foster was being replaced by a cold, results-driven approach. People who had been part of the company for years, some of whom had trained Jessica herself, were now being pushed out to make way for a younger, more cost-effective workforce. Amanda's leadership style contrasted sharply with Jessica's. Where Jessica valued loyalty, mentorship, and experience, Amanda focused on numbers, efficiency, and quick results. Amanda's mistake, though, was thinking that people were interchangeable, believing that newer, younger employees could replace the institutional knowledge and relationships that Jessica and others had spent years building. The rapid changes, while they may have made sense on paper, failed to consider the value of long-term employees who knew the ins and outs of the company and its clients. The lesson here is simple. While change can be necessary for growth, it's essential to understand and respect the people who have contributed to the company's success. A CEO who tries to impose change without considering the human aspect of the business is likely to alienate valuable team members and lose the very heart of the organization. Jessica, caught in this whirlwind of change, began to question everything she had worked for. And then came the moment that would force her to face the reality of Amanda's vision, one that would soon impact her more than she could have ever imagined. It was a chilly Friday morning when Jessica was called into the conference room with Amanda, Kevin, and Richard. The glass walls of the room seemed to trap the air, making everything feel colder than it already was. Jessica sat in the chair, trying to maintain her composure, but inside, her heart was racing. She had a sinking feeling that something was about to change, something that would alter the course of her life forever. She had no idea, though, just how severe it would be. Amanda, her calm demeanor almost clinical, began speaking in a steady voice, but to Jessica, each word felt like a punch to the gut. "Jessica," Amanda said, "we're restructuring, and as part of that process, your position has been deemed redundant." The words didn't sink in at first. Redundant. What did that even mean? Jessica could feel her chest tightening, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. She had given so much to this company, her time, her energy, her heart, and now in one cold sentence, it was all being swept away. Her mind began to race, a storm of thoughts swirling inside her head. How could this happen? What did I do wrong? Didn't they see my contributions? She thought back to the countless hours she'd spent working overtime, the time she had taken on more responsibility than anyone asked, the time she'd stayed late to finish a project or clean up someone else's mess. She had been the backbone of this company, the one people turned to when things got tough. And now, she was being told that she didn't matter. Jessica tried to keep her composure, folding her hands in her lap, keeping her breathing steady, but it felt impossible. The words echoed in her mind. Redundant, redundant, redundant. She couldn't stop the wave of disbelief that washed over her. She had seen the email, had known changes were coming, but she never thought it would be this. She never thought it would be her. This moment highlighted a painful truth. When companies remove long-standing employees, they're not just losing a worker. They're losing the depth of experience, loyalty, and history that those employees bring. Jessica's years of dedication were disregarded as though they never mattered. And while companies may look at numbers and bottom lines, they fail to understand the human impact of their decisions. Removing long-term employees without recognition not only devalues their hard work, but also creates a culture of mistrust. For Jessica, it wasn't just the job that was taken away. It was the years of sacrifice, the relationships she had built, the sense of identity she had created through her work. This was a moment of betrayal, a betrayal that would push her to do something she had never expected, to fight back. And as she sat there, hearing the rest of the details about severance and what was expected of her, one thought stayed in her mind. I won't let them get away with this. As Amanda's cold words settled in the room, Jessica felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. But the moment that truly stung wasn't Amanda's announcement. It was Kevin's words. Kevin, her direct supervisor for the past several years, leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with a smirk on his face. His eyes gleamed, betraying a certain satisfaction that sent a chill down Jessica's spine. Then he spoke, his voice dripping with insincerity. We're just cleaning house, Jessica. Trimming the dead weight, he said, as though this was a routine, a necessary evil that meant nothing. Jessica's heart sank at the words. Dead weight. That's how Kevin saw her. After all the late nights, the overtime, the mentoring, the countless hours spent solving problems that no one else would take on, she was now being reduced to a burden, a liability. To him, she was just another name on a list of redundancies, someone who no longer fit into the company's shiny new vision. This wasn't the first time Kevin had made Jessica feel small. Over the years, his behavior had become more and more dismissive. There was the time he took credit for a project that Jessica had worked on for months, presenting it in the boardroom as his own idea while barely acknowledging her role. When she had asked for recognition, he simply brushed her off, telling her that credit isn't something you get for doing your job. It stung then, but Jessica had swallowed her frustration, thinking that maybe he just didn't know better. And now, sitting in this conference room, hearing him refer to her as dead weight, Jessica realized just how much contempt he held for her. Kevin had always been a man of ambition, more focused on his own career and climbing the corporate ladder than actually respecting the people who helped him get there. But this was different. This wasn't just about his ego. This was about how he saw the people who worked beneath him, the ones who had put in the hours and cared about the company. To Kevin, they were just obstacles to his own success. Kevin's behavior serves as a painful reminder of how toxic leadership can be in a workplace. His lack of empathy and respect for Jessica not only devalued her efforts but also contributed to her feeling of betrayal. People like Kevin, who are more focused on their own advancement than the well-being of their team, can cause deep emotional harm. Their actions erode trust, lower morale, and create a toxic environment that stifles collaboration and growth. In the end, a leader's character matters just as much as their skill set. When leadership lacks integrity, it can break down the spirit of an entire team, leaving those who have given their all feeling discarded and unappreciated. Jessica's thoughts were racing, but she forced herself to keep calm. She knew she had to rise above this. Kevin's cruelty wasn't going to break her. But it did make her realize something important. If she was going to get through this, it would have to be on her own terms. And she wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Kevin, decide her worth. After the meeting, as Jessica walked out of the conference room, her mind was still reeling from the cold finality of Amanda's words and Kevin's dismissive tone. She barely made it a few steps when she heard a soft voice behind her. It was Emma, the young analyst who had only been with the company for a couple of years. "Jessica, I'm really sorry about what happened," Emma said, her voice faltering as she approached. "I know this must be really hard. I just wanted you to know that it's not personal. It's just business." At first, Jessica felt a flicker of gratitude. Emma had always been kind, polite, and respectful. She was a fresh face in the office, someone who still seemed to have that idealistic view of the world, a view that hadn't been tainted by years of corporate politics. But as Emma spoke, something about her words felt hollow to Jessica. Just business. That phrase, so often used by those who wanted to avoid the emotional consequences of their actions, stung in a way that words alone couldn't explain. The sympathy in Emma's eyes only made Jessica feel more isolated. Here was someone new, someone who didn't understand the years of hard work Jessica had put into this company. Emma's words weren't malicious, but they felt like a slap in the face. Just business. As if the dedication, loyalty, and sacrifices didn't matter. As if Jessica, someone who had given a decade of her life to Dalton and Brooks, were just another cog in the machine to be discarded when it no longer served its purpose. What made it worse was the silence that followed. The other employees, those who had been with the company just as long as Jessica, said nothing. They were either too afraid to speak up or too indifferent to care. In that moment, Jessica realized that she was alone. Despite the years of camaraderie, of shared challenges and late-night talks, when it came down to it, no one really stood up for her. She looked at Emma, trying to mask the hurt. "I understand," Jessica said, forcing a smile. But deep down, she felt a deep loneliness that no one in the office seemed to notice. Emma, in her attempt to be kind, had only highlighted how alone Jessica truly was in this fight. Emma's sympathy, though well-meaning, shows the difficult position that many young employees find themselves in when faced with harsh corporate realities. They want to do the right thing, to be kind and supportive, but they are also bound by the company's decisions and the expectations placed upon them. For employees like Emma, it's a fine line to walk, trying to maintain relationships with colleagues who are being mistreated, while also trying to protect themselves from the very same fate. The painful truth is that, sometimes, empathy can feel like an empty gesture when it doesn't come with real action. Young employees often find themselves in the middle, torn between loyalty to their peers and the harsh corporate realities they must face. In the end, Jessica learned that real support doesn't just come from words. It comes from actions that challenge the status quo and stand up for what's right. As Jessica stood there, lost in her own thoughts, she realized that the fight ahead would have to be hers alone. But the seed had been planted. If this was what it meant to be, just business, then perhaps it was time to change the game entirely. I know this story may resonate with many of you, whether you've been in a similar situation at work or have faced unexpected challenges in your own life. Jessica's story is one of loyalty, betrayal, and the fight for justice. But what do you think? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt blindsided by the people you trusted the most? How did you handle it? Or maybe you've experienced a time when you had to stand up for yourself against all odds. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your story. Let's keep this conversation going, because sometimes the strength we need to move forward is found in the stories we share with each other. We can't wait to hear from you. It was late one evening, long after the office had quieted down and most of her colleagues had gone home. Jessica sat alone at her desk, her computer screen casting a soft glow in the darkened room. She had been sifting through emails, organizing files, trying to distract herself from the wave of emotions that had overtaken her after the meeting earlier that day. The weight of what Amanda had said and Kevin's heartless remarks lingered in her mind. As she scrolled through her inbox, One email caught her eye. It was a forwarded thread that had been accidentally copied to her. The subject line wasn't anything extraordinary, just a typical internal updates notification. Jessica almost dismissed it, but something in the back of her mind told her to open it. She clicked. The first few lines appeared innocuous, discussing some routine restructuring efforts, but then her eyes froze on a name: Kevin. Her stomach dropped as she continued reading. The thread detailed a plan, a strategy that had been in the works for weeks, and the truth hit her like a tidal wave. Kevin, along with Amanda, had been planning to eliminate senior staff members like herself under the guise of modernization. The email was filled with phrases like streamlining the workforce, cost-saving measures, and worst of all, removal of redundant employees. Jessica's hands shook as she read the words over and over again. The people she had trusted, Kevin, Amanda, were orchestrating this plan to get rid of her and others like her. Her worst fears, her deepest suspicions, had been confirmed. She wasn't just losing her job. She was being cast aside without a second thought, as if the years she had given to this company meant nothing at all. For a moment she felt numb. The reality of the situation settled heavily on her shoulders. She knew now that the layoff wasn't some isolated incident. It was part of a larger strategy. Jessica's role, her future, had already been decided for her. But instead of spiraling into despair, something inside her shifted. A calm determination began to take root. She had a choice. She could accept this and walk away, or she could fight back. And Jessica had never been one to walk away from a fight. She closed the email, her mind already racing with plans and possibilities. Over the next few days, Jessica began to prepare herself for what was coming. She carefully documented every piece of information, every email, every meeting she had been a part of. She started building a case, not just for herself but for the others who were at risk. She knew she needed to be strategic. She couldn't rush in blind. She had to be calculated, precise, and most importantly, ready for the confrontation that would inevitably come. Jessica's discovery of the internal email underscores the importance of transparency in the workplace. When management withholds critical information, they not only undermine trust but also put their employees in a position where they are forced to react instead of proactively planning for their futures. In this case, the lack of open communication and the secrecy surrounding the layoffs created a toxic atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The lesson here is that companies must maintain transparency, especially during times of change. When employees are left in the dark, it not only erodes trust but also fosters a sense of betrayal, as Jessica experienced. It is essential for leaders to respect their employees' right to know what's going on, as transparency can prevent chaos and create a sense of shared purpose, even in difficult times. Now, with the pieces in place, Jessica knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to be anyone's casualty. The battle had only just begun, and she was ready to face it head-on. The following Monday morning, Jessica sat in Amanda's office, feeling the weight of everything that had happened over the past week pressing down on her shoulders. Her mind was still spinning from the internal email discovery, but she had steeled herself for what was coming next. Today, she would receive the official severance package, and she knew this moment would be just as heart-wrenching as everything that had led up to it. Amanda, sitting behind her sleek, modern desk, didn't look up from her computer as she spoke. The cold efficiency in her tone made it clear that this was nothing more than a transaction to her. "Jessica," she said, almost without any real empathy, "as discussed, your position has been eliminated. We've prepared your severance package." She slid a manila folder across the desk, the paper inside it looking so ordinary, so formal. Yet for Jessica, it felt like a life sentence. Amanda's words were clinical, detached, and she didn't even pause to make eye contact. It was as if Jessica's years of dedication, her passion, her late nights, none of it had mattered. Amanda wasn't offering her the opportunity to discuss anything, no words of appreciation, no acknowledgement of her value. It was simply a business transaction. Jessica's hand hovered over the folder, and for a brief moment, she felt the sting of betrayal. The same hands that had spent years typing reports, organizing accounts, leading teams, now hesitated, unsure if they could touch the document that would mark the end of everything she had worked for. The folder felt cold and heavy in her hands, as if it was carrying the weight of her shattered career, and yet she couldn't bring herself to open it just yet. Amanda continued, unfazed by Jessica's silence. "We'll need your company laptop, keycard, and phone by the end of the day. HR will handle the logistics. Your team will be informed of your departure this afternoon." The words hit her like a punch. End of the day. Team. It was all just business for Amanda, but to Jessica, this was her life. She had poured her heart and soul into this company, no matter the challenges, no matter the hours. And now, in the blink of an eye, it was all being dismissed like she had never mattered at all. Jessica stood up, taking the folder, but her thoughts were a swirl of disappointment and anger. She didn't say a word to Amanda as she turned and walked out of the office, the silence between them more deafening than any words could be. The hallway outside Amanda's office seemed longer than usual, and as Jessica passed by the offices of her colleagues, she couldn't help but feel that their indifference echoed Amanda's. She had worked beside these people for years, and yet, not one of them seemed to care enough to even acknowledge the injustice that was happening to her. Her heart sank with every step. Lesson. Amanda's cold handling of Jessica's severance highlights the harmful impact of a lack of empathy and respect in the workplace. When companies treat their employees like disposable assets, it not only damages the relationship between employer and employee, but it also leaves the employee feeling devalued and unappreciated. Jessica wasn't just losing her job. She was losing the recognition and respect she had earned over the years. This situation serves as a cautionary tale for companies. How you handle employee separations, especially those who have been loyal for years, speaks volumes about your company's culture. Disrespecting and dismissing employees in such a cold manner can lead to lost morale, a damaged reputation, and ultimately higher turnover rates. The lesson here is that, even in difficult times, companies should strive to maintain a sense of dignity and respect for their employees. A well-handled severance package, one that acknowledges the contributions of the employee and offers support, can make a world of difference, not only to the individual but to the company's long-term reputation. As Jessica walked out of the building that day, her mind was already made up. The fight wasn't over. She had been treated like a piece of discarded equipment, but she knew her worth. And she wasn't going to let Amanda or anyone else define her future. Walking out of Dalton and Brooks for what she knew would be the last time, Jessica felt a fire ignite within her, a sense of indignation that refused to fade. But even as the anger bubbled up inside, she knew this wasn't going to be a fight won by emotion. No, this battle would be won with patience, precision, and strategy. Jessica wasn't going to let Amanda and Kevin get away with treating her, and the others, like nothing more than expendable assets. But revenge, she realized, wasn't just about striking back in the heat of the moment. It was about making them pay in a way that would leave a lasting impact. It was about proving to herself and to them that her value wasn't something that could be dismissed so easily. Over the next few days, Jessica began to formulate a plan. She knew she had to be smart, meticulous, and careful. Rushing into this would only make her vulnerable. She started by gathering everything she could find: the emails, the internal communications, and any memos she had access to. Every piece of information was a potential weapon. Jessica knew that if she wanted to get back at Amanda and Kevin, she needed to expose the truth, their hidden agendas, their manipulative tactics, and the way they had exploited the trust of the employees for their own gain. As she reviewed the emails again, Jessica paid attention to the subtle details: the phrasing, the tone, the decisions that were made behind closed doors. She found traces of Kevin's attempts to cover up their plans, leaving behind small clues that could unravel the entire scheme. He'd been careless, too sure of himself, too blinded by his own ambition to notice that Jessica had been watching, learning, and waiting. But revenge wasn't just about exposing Kevin and Amanda. It was about showing them, and everyone else, that Jessica had something they could never take away: integrity. She knew her worth, and now it was time to remind them. She began to reach out to her former colleagues, those who had been affected by the layoffs, and quietly started to build a network of support. She wasn't going to act alone. Jessica wanted to make sure that when the time came, it would be a unified force, a well-planned strategy that couldn't be ignored. The more she planned, the clearer it became. She wasn't just seeking vengeance. She was reclaiming her dignity. Her actions would send a message not only to Amanda and Kevin but to every other employee who had ever felt overlooked, underappreciated, or discarded. The lesson here is that revenge, when done with careful thought and strategy, isn't about recklessness. It's about reclaiming your power and showing your worth. In the world of corporate politics, those who play by the rules and who take the time to understand the intricacies of the system are often the ones who come out on top. Jessica's plan wasn't fueled by blind rage. It was driven by a desire for justice and respect. Revenge, in this case, wasn't a rash, impulsive decision. It was a calculated, deliberate response to years of being taken for granted. It serves as a reminder that, in any workplace, actions have consequences. And when those in power fail to recognize the value of their employees, they risk losing more than just a dedicated worker. They risk losing their integrity and reputation. Jessica knew that taking this step would change everything. It wasn't about getting back at Amanda or Kevin. It was about standing up for what was right, about showing that integrity and loyalty still had a place in a world that so often valued profit over people. And with every piece of evidence she collected, with every person she spoke to, Jessica was setting the stage for a comeback that would make them regret ever underestimating her. After days of meticulous planning, Jessica was ready. Her mind was clear, her strategy in place, and she was no longer the broken woman who had walked out of Dalton and Brooks. She was someone who had taken control of her own fate, someone who would not allow her hard work, loyalty, and integrity to be discarded. It was time for Amanda and Kevin to face the consequences of their actions. The first step of her plan was to ensure that the evidence she had gathered, the emails, internal communications, and memos, was solid. Jessica didn't want to rush this. She carefully cross-referenced the documents, looking for inconsistencies and contradictions that would expose the true nature of Amanda and Kevin's plan. It didn't take long for her to find the smoking gun, a trail of emails that not only outlined their intention to eliminate senior staff under the guise of restructuring, but also revealed their discussions about cutting costs at the expense of loyal employees. With this information in hand, Jessica's next step was to expose the hypocrisy and deception at the heart of the company. She began contacting her former colleagues, those who had been affected by the layoffs and had felt the sting of Amanda and Kevin's cold decisions. Jessica knew that together they could build a powerful case. One by one, she met with them, sharing what she had uncovered and encouraging them to speak out about their experiences. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to come together. Her former co-workers, once too afraid to speak up, now saw the truth. They saw the bigger picture, and they realized that their silence had allowed Amanda and Kevin to get away with their unethical actions. The final part of her plan involved taking the issue to the public. Jessica had always been a quiet, behind-the-scenes type of person, but she knew that this wasn't something that could remain hidden. She reached out to a local journalist known for investigative work, someone who had covered similar corporate stories before. She made sure to carefully present the evidence, ensuring it was airtight and irrefutable. The story was soon picked up by the media. Jessica's allegations of corporate misconduct, of an unjust restructuring that had targeted long-term employees, spread like wildfire. Amanda and Kevin were forced to answer questions in the public eye, their reputations tarnished by the very actions they had hoped would remain concealed. The pressure from the media, along with the mounting support from former employees, made it impossible for them to maintain their positions without facing the fallout of their decisions. Jessica's execution of her plan demonstrates the power of intelligence, persistence, and the courage to stand up for what's right. It wasn't just about striking back in anger. It was about being methodical and strategic in her approach. Jessica didn't allow herself to be a victim. She became an agent of change, using the system's own flaws to her advantage. In a corporate environment, the consequences of revenge can be far-reaching. Jessica's actions had forced Amanda and Kevin to face the truth of their misconduct, but it also sent a broader message to the company, that unethical behavior would not go unnoticed. The lesson here is that, While revenge can be a powerful motivator, it must be executed with wisdom and care. In a professional setting, standing up for what's right can have a lasting impact, not just on the individuals involved but on the organization as a whole. Jessica didn't just seek retribution. She exposed the truth, showed her own strength, and in the process, changed the course of her own future. Through her intelligence, her persistence, and her strategic execution, she proved that sometimes the best way to get back at those who wrong you is to take the high road, one that leads to justice and ultimately to self-respect. Months had passed since Jessica had launched her plan, and the reverberations of her actions were still being felt. The media storm had died down, but the impact on Dalton and Brooks Financial was undeniable. Amanda and Kevin were no longer in charge. The company's reputation, once pristine, was now tarnished, with employees who had been underpaid and overworked finally speaking out about their mistreatment. Jessica had succeeded in exposing the truth, and her fight had brought the changes she had always hoped for. But as Jessica stood in the quiet of her apartment one evening, staring out the window, she realized something profound. Victory had come at a cost, and it wasn't just about the public accolades or the vindication of seeing Amanda and Kevin brought low. No, it was something deeper, something more personal. At first, she had thought that revenge would bring her the closure she sought, that bringing her former bosses to justice would somehow fill the void they had left. But now, in the quiet moments of reflection, Jessica saw things differently. Winning, exposing the truth, and making them face the consequences of their actions had been cathartic. But it didn't make her feel whole. It didn't erase the pain of betrayal she had felt, and it didn't mend the years of loyalty that had been unappreciated. In truth, what Jessica had discovered in the aftermath was that victory didn't always mean feeling like a winner. As much as she had wanted to make Amanda and Kevin feel the consequences of their cold decisions, she realized that holding on to the anger and bitterness from that chapter in her life wasn't serving her anymore. It was time to let go. It wasn't an easy process. Forgiveness, especially after such a deep betrayal, was something Jessica had to work through on her own terms. But as she sat with her thoughts, she came to understand that forgiveness wasn't for Amanda or Kevin. It was for herself. She needed to free herself from the weight of that anger, to allow herself to move on without being defined by the past. And so, as the days turned into weeks, Jessica made peace with what had happened. She let go of the anger, understanding that the strength she had gained through the ordeal wasn't just about standing up to the wrongs of others, it was about finding the courage to move forward. She began to focus on herself again, rediscovering passions she had once left behind in the corporate grind. One day, a headhunter reached out to her with a new opportunity at a company that valued not just results, but people. The interview felt different than any she had done before. It wasn't about selling herself. It was about finding a place where she could truly thrive. When they offered her the job, Jessica didn't hesitate. It was time to start a new chapter, one that was defined by her own values, not the toxic culture of the past. As she walked into her new office on her first day, Jessica felt a quiet sense of pride. She wasn't just starting a new job, she was starting a new life. She had learned the importance of self-respect, of standing firm in the face of injustice, but also of letting go and embracing change. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. Jessica's journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about growth and self-discovery. Through her quest for justice, she learned that true victory doesn't come from getting back at those who wronged you. It comes from finding peace within yourself. The lesson here is that forgiveness, though difficult, is a powerful tool for personal growth. It allows you to move forward without the burden of resentment. And sometimes the greatest revenge is not about defeating others, but about rising above, finding your own worth, and creating a future that aligns with your values. Jessica's story is a reminder that, in the end, life isn't just about fighting back against the wrongs we experience. It's about learning from those experiences, letting go of the past, and embracing new opportunities that allow us to live authentically. And as Jessica had learned, there's always a new chapter waiting for those brave enough to start again. Thank you so much for sticking with us through Jessica's journey. What a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience we all carry within ourselves, even when we're pushed to the edge. The lesson here is clear. No matter how difficult or unfair life may seem, we always have the power to take control of our destiny. Standing up for yourself and staying true to your values can make all the difference. Now we'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you learn from Jessica's story? How would you have handled the situation if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We can't wait to hear from you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. We'll see you in the next one.